Welcome to the Humans versus Retirement podcast with me, Dan Haylett. This show will help you navigate the intricate financial and non-financial landscape of retirement planning, investment and income strategies, and the human experience beyond the traditional work-life paradigm. Join me as I delve into the challenges, triumphs, and unexpected journeys individuals face as they transition into this new phase of life. From experts across many different areas to personal stories, we uncover the secrets, insights, and practical tips to empower you on your retirement journey. Whether you're just starting to consider retirement or already enjoying this chapter, this podcast is your guide to making the most out of this remarkable phase of life. Now, on to the show. Hello everyone and welcome to another brilliant conversation on the Humans versus Retirement podcast. Today I get to sit down and talk all things retirement with one of Australia's preeminent authorities on modern retirement, the brilliant Bec Wilson. Bec is the founder of Epic Retirement, author of the brilliant book, How to Have an Epic Retirement, host of the Primetime podcast, a weekly contributor to national radio and newspaper columns throughout Australia, and has one of the best retirement education programs down under. In this episode, Bec and I discuss key themes and pillars of a modern retirement. Bec shares her journey into the retirement space and the inspiration behind her book. Our conversation highlights the interconnectedness of time, money, health, happiness, and interestingly, your home in creating an epic retirement. We delve into the importance of happiness and fulfilment in retirement, touching on Bec's passion for travel and why she believes it should be the foundation to many epic retirement plans. Bec's mission is to educate and inspire people to live their best life in their second half. And I know this episode will show that in abundance and add so much value to you. Now, on to the conversation with Bec Wilson. Bec Wilson, a very, very warm welcome all the way from the other side of the globe, Brisbane, Australia, to the Humans versus Retirement podcast.
Thank you for having me.
This is cool. I can't wait to have this conversation. The time difference, Bec, means that you have just eaten dinner and you're on your gin and tonics.
I am. I have the beautiful glass here to show the proof.
I've just eaten breakfast and I'm on my coffee, so you couldn't be more polar opposite. I can't wait to have this conversation with you. You have written, I think, a brilliant book on retirement called How to Have an Epic Retirement. And we're going to go through that. We're going to go through your brilliant views on a modern day retirement. And yeah, can't wait to jump in the conversation and get a raw Australian take on a modern day retirement.
Oh, what a blessing.
This is going to be cool. So tell me a bit about you. So I think your journey is really interesting, how you kind of have got into the retirement space, how you start to thought about it, and how really you've ended up writing this brilliant book.
Yeah, look, 11 years ago, I was running a marketing business working for a whole lot of corporates and mid-sized companies, actually, mainly. And they were asking me to help them with their whole business strategy based on economic trends. And I kept saying, watch what's happening with the baby boomer market. There's going to be some significant changes there. And I guess I was a bit of a marketing futurist and planner. And at some point I sort of sat back and went, why am I not watching the baby boom market? Why don't I do a bit of that? And so I started a blog, can you believe, with a $40 template in 2013 called Starts at 60. And within a couple of years, it had grown to 1 million followers. We took on millions of dollars of venture funding when that was cool. Grew a media company, a travel business. We rode it right into a COVID. That was really fun. As the travel business was rampantly expanding. We got it through a COVID and right back out the other side and back into growth. And I thought, you know what, 10 years in, I know what every over 60 needs. And now I need to put my heart and soul into doing a personal job of researching for the answers. And that's what led me in my transition project out of what I'd call my working full-time career into my next phase career, which I call my prime time, because I believe your prime time starts somewhere around about 47 when you get that taste for doing things that have real meaning and purpose, and that can lead you into that third act of your life. So I'm living that right now, and my first project was to write the ultimate retirement guidebook, and not just one about money, but one that took in all of modern aging, all the science of healthy living, the ways to understand happiness without it feeling all woo-woo and wellness and, sort of young person, making it grounded in the way this generation hopefully takes content seriously. So from having served them for 10 years, I feel like I know a little bit about what I'm doing, and it appears to have worked. We got #1 on the bestseller list in Australia last week for 2023 in retirement, and #2 behind our all-time amazing financial author in this country on the finance and consumer issues list. So I feel like I won the lottery.
Yeah, and you absolutely deserve it. I think you've written an amazing book. And
thank you.
And I think, I'll put the link to the books in the show notes. And for anyone listening that is and outside of Australia on the podcast, whether you're in the UK, the US, or elsewhere, yeah, there are some things that are relevant to Australia in the book, but there's 80% of the book is portable to anywhere that you go. And in fact, I think it's really interesting to learn how good the country of Australia has been in setting up things to help people retire with purpose and meaning, because I think you guys have been at the forefront of some of this stuff actually globally. So we can maybe touch on that a little bit as we move on. So yeah, thoroughly well deserved.
Look, I think Australia is at the forefront of this whole sector, and financially we are very advanced. We know the superannuation system, which was brought in 32 years ago, is absolutely top of its game for driving compound investing, which is the thing that underpins financial confidence later in life. So, that's something I think the rest of the world is catching on to, but it'll take time for it to catch up, and it'll take changes to laws and legislations, and that will take a long time potentially. But we also have an awful lot of other systems that are very, very similar to the rest of the world, the Western world. And so I hope we can find some compatibilities, and then maybe we can share ideas and come up with a new version for the global market one day. Yeah.
Well, and I know from the work that I've done over here and this podcast and all of the work that there is an absolute thirst from the public to understand more about what I know that they are increasingly understanding is probably the most important phase of their life. And I don't think there's enough out there talking about the human element of retirement planning. It gets rooted in some of the numbers. The numbers make people anxious. They then pull away from the whole thing and end up, that kind of they have like that paradox of choice, and they get they don't do anything because they've just got so many things that are just kind of swirling around in their head. They don't get to the root of the issues.
Well, it's frighteningly overwhelming when you look at the finance section of the book, that there's 11 sections to master in finance just to understand your finances and get your investing structure in place for retirement, before you even have to understand then how to draw down your money once you're in retirement. So just getting somebody's head around that, and then having the world likely to change in longevity somewhere along the path in the next 30 years, that some of us might live longer than we expect, exponentially longer. So the whole ground is shifting in this space, but there's excellent science on which we can base a lot of the conversations outside of finance. And finance is actually based on some pretty fundamental rules. And when you can break it down and explain them, people's lights come on, and then they go, I get it. I can do that. I can break down that little task into something I can apply. And then they can move to step 2, and then they can move to step 3. And all of a sudden it starts to become an epic picture. And I think we need to help people make it a quest. The curiosity is worth it. We get further because we're curious. And, if we can keep people curious about retirement and what it can be for them, by God, we can change it from being that tired old thing that it's been made into.
Love that. I couldn't agree more. I want to touch on one thing before I get into kind of the real meaty part of this conversation that I can't wait to go. How do you think your thoughts about retirement differ from kind of conventional wisdom? Is there kind of some really key things that you could say, well, look, all the work that I've done with people in this space, these are the things that actually, the bit of myth busting, these are the things that actually matter, and these are the things that everyone else tells us that matters?
I think the thing I've based my values on coming into this space and starting to write very, very regularly and present information in online courses and masterclasses and things like that is to be downright honest and to tell you the truth and to not dress it up in products. I'm not selling anything. So I'm in this very unique position where everybody I'm working with might be selling something, and I can help them teach the consumer how the world works, but I'm not selling their products. So for me, they might offer what I do as a value add on to build some loyalty on top of their services, but I'm not really selling anything other than people should know the truth about how the systems work. They should know where it's tricky and where they should be prepared for some sticky mud, where people have found trouble before, and I can raise a red flag and say, here, just be careful if you're thinking of getting a credit card after the age of 55 because it can be bloody hard. Just be careful if you pay off your mortgage and then want to take some more debt because no bank wants a 6-year-old customer as a mortgage debt holder. Thinking about the way the systems work and just knowing that. Because otherwise these things are urban myths that nobody really tells you. It's a little bit like childbirth. Have you got children?
I've got 2 daughters, yep.
I
didn't give birth to them though, so I can't really go.
You may remember, as a woman, I remember the period before I had children where everybody made it out to be this beautifully rosy thing, and nobody tells you about the crappy bits until after. And then all the mothers sit in forums privately delivering woe to each other about how to deal with the trouble, right? Well, there's none of that in retirement. Financial advisors hold the keys to how to navigate it, right? And they're really the only people with enough learned experience from listening to people's pain. And there's nobody else because journalists can't interview enough people because old people aren't sexy in the media, right? So in order to really dig this open, you've got to be interested enough to go and ask people, to go and poke and prod and to poke industry professionals, governments, legislators, and scientists and real people, and just listen and try and figure out a way to tell the stories.
It's so true, isn't it? It's so, as you say, you kind of go, oh, you should have children. They're amazing. And they're really hard work. And quite a lot of the time it's not amazing. And even as I've got a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old. And yes, it's tough. It's tough work. But and as you said, these forums that people go on and stuff like that, my wife's on them, and you kind of look in some of them, I think, oh my God, these poor women that are trying to kind of lean on each other to sort this stuff out. And you're absolutely right in making that comparison.
But retirement's a bit different because you come in with this idealistic view, or you come in afraid of it, and that's one or the other, right? And I don't want to dress it up. Like the book cover is magical. It's meant to be a sunrise, not a sunset. It's meant to be a bit of Indiana Jones and the epic quest. And that is meant to say something about staying curious, about pushing yourself to keep learning, about being in a position of moving forward at a vibration level that's positive. But not everybody has that when they come in. So, there's some of if nobody tells you the rules, that you can't go into this tired and fatigued, you can't go into it lazy, or you don't get the epic out, right? That's the bit I really want people to know. So I want people to know what levers they've got to pull here, because they don't have retirement coaches. Well, I don't know. In Australia, there's not really retirement coaches, and I don't think people would part with money that often for a retirement coach. Super funds aren't offering it as a service. It's financial planning that we do for retirement. We don't do what the hell are you going to do after you stop working discussions.
Yeah, no, I think I think it roots itself into how, and we talked for a good 10 or so minutes before hitting record about this. It roots itself in the financial services industry that has vested interest in shifting products to make themselves money, they make us all believe that it's a money problem that can get solved by money solutions. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of financial advisors still sit. And I think our collective mission around this is to go, well, actually, I believe it's a human problem solved by human-based conversations and solutions. And actually, a bit like, I play golf, a bit like a golf bag. You've got many clubs that can hit the ball different distances. You've got many different things. And I think it's often like we're just carrying one club in a bag, and it's the club of the pension or the money. And we know all of the evidence and the science suggests to us that money is, one of the, if not the most anxiety driving, emotive subjects that we can get. I've said many times on this podcast, I've had couples sit in front of me say that they would rather talk about their sex life than their money situation, right? They feel more comfortable talking about their sex life. Just like everyone's let that sink in, because
in England, that's a big call in England.
And we're reserved, right? And we are reserved. But we know that. So we're trying to hit this problem over the head with a money thing that causes more anxiety. And what we're not doing is tackling, as much as I think, look, money is important. We know that, but tackling the human element of this and the journey that people go on during their work, in the transition out of work, to having more time on their hands, to thinking about what they're doing, to thinking about their purpose and their passions, and what makes them tick and what's really, truly important to them. As you said, being curious, learning, growing, all of that stuff we don't explore with as much as what we should do.
And it's like a big wheel, because if you start at one area of it, you find that if you haven't talked about what you're going to do with your time, you can't get a reasonable budget going on around how you're going to spend your money on what you're going to do with your days. And you can't then, okay, so you want to travel. Have you thought about how much money you're actually going to have so that you can set reasonable travel budgets that are within your means? You've kind of got to get the whole picture going all at once, which is why when I wrote Epic Retirement, I actually wrote the money section twice, ripped it up, rewrote it again, because I needed to write a lot of the other spine of the book and then come back and rewrite the money section to recognize just how to bed the thing together into the pillars, because it is so interwoven. I don't actually know how we've got so many money books on the market about retirement and so few books that touch on the tangled process. I wanted to write a what to expect when you're expecting, which was the guidebook when I had a child, but for retirement, that was based on real insights into the way the systems work, the way life works, the way science works, the way aging works, so that you can make the right choices.
It's so true. Bec, the people come in and say, one of the questions is, I've got this amount of money, how much can I spend? Right? The answer is, what do you want to do? Like that, you can't. And actually, the way that you have to explore your life to figure out what you want to do then probably goes down another 6, 7, 8, 10 levels. So, it's not this kind of linear thing that happens. Spending in retirement is entirely flexible and I've done a load of work on this and had several podcast episodes about it, but does change, right? You want to spend more money at the front of your retirement when time and health is on your side than you will do at the back end of your retirement. And actually, all the research across the Western world says that real-time spending falls by about 1% a year. So we know that naturally spending falls, but we seem to be obsessed about this. How much can I spend? Well, that's your money dictating your life. You need to let your life dictate what you want to do. And that then kind of, as you said, just weaves itself down and down and down into the...
And you have to live within your means, right? And that's the first thing I teach people I'm not a financial advisor. I'm very, very cautious to say that I'm simply somebody who's learned all the rules of retirement and understood the systems quite well. And I always defer to the financial advisor in the room to check I've got it right. But the reality is, Budgeting comes from having ambitions and goals and then saying, how can I get there? Can I get there, or do I need to adjust? Right. And if you don't have ambitions and goals, then you're going to live a small life. And I don't want people to think they have to live a small life. My mum's lived in a caravan for 4 years traveling around Australia on a government pension, right? There is ways to live your life to the fullest economically. You just have to have the will.
And everyone's different definition of fullest is different, right? Some people could have a wonderful, full and meaningful life, and it doesn't have to involve these massive kind of things, spending loads of money, right? And it's just making sure that everyone feels like they're in that position, that they can truly look within, find out what's important, and then figure out a way to use their assets and their time to support that. And I said before we hit record, many people spend more time planning a 2-week holiday than they do a 30-year or even 40-year retirement in brackets. We need to spend some time thinking about this as individuals, about our own retirement, and know that there are people out there and resources out there we can go to help us do it, because it's one of those subjects that I think is too important to actually do it alone, alone and by yourself. I actually think it's very difficult to independently kind of plan a retirement for yourself, because you're full of your own learnings and biases about stuff that you've read, and Dave down the pub done it like this and my parents done it like that, and you've got all this information that's probably 90% of it is wrong in your head. You need someone independent to look at this and go, well, this is what the evidence suggests. This is how it should work for you. This is what you've kind of said, and tease out the most important things for you, because it can take a bit of time to feel relaxed to have those kind of conversations.
Look, and they say in every transition in life, you need someone to hold your hand through the sandstorm. When you're going through change, whether you're going through a divorce, whether you're going through a major change in life that's horrifying, you've lost a partner, something like that, or you're changing a major stage of your career in your 50s, say, and you've got to get through change. You've got to start all over again and feel different about yourself. They say find someone who will hold your hand in the sandstorm. And to be honest, you also need financial insight, because most of the time somebody who's holding your hand in the sandstorm for the emotional benefits doesn't have the financial insight.
Yeah, and I think, but that's kind of what I as you rightly said, I think this, if you kind of said I need a retirement coach, I still think that you badge that into kind of life coaching. And I think it takes a certain individual to want to go and pay to have some life coaching, right? You need to feel like you're, but actually as financial planners, I do believe it's our duty to learn and understand the emotional side of this stuff, because we are uniquely positioned to have those conversations with people. They are not going to go anywhere and have these conversations with anyone apart from us.
I agree. There is no other profession that touches this generation at the point of transition. And so there is nowhere else for them to go, because there is no other profession built up. Even for me to provide education, I bring my education through financial advisors and through superannuation funds, or pension funds, as you would call them. And they are the ongoing service providers to this consumer. Therefore, it makes sense that they offer the right education and the right help to consumers at this stage of their life. And it can be transformational for people to just take away these little kernels of insight into how to feel less anxious at each stage, how to examine where the anxiety is coming from, how to take active steps out of the anxiety if they're feeling it, know that it's normal to feel it even, right? That alone, people write to me letters and notes all the time saying, I can't believe I felt this for a couple of years and I didn't know I was completely normal, and that there were things I could do. And things like relevance deprivation syndrome when you hit retirement, and they thought that there was something wrong with them, that they weren't enjoying retirement. And these are classically understood but perhaps never written down concepts that float through the industry, right? The industry knows it happens. They know how to recognize it, but because the industry is so good at their jobs of personal service, they have to go one-on-one to provide people that insight.
Do you know, one of the things that's really important that you said there, that and the feedback that we get from the wonderful clients and families that we look after is that we've kind of we've intentionally built a community of people that are all roughly either in the same stage transition or gone through it, but unintentionally we've kind of brought them together, right? And they just, I mean, we've got kind of, you know, like a private Facebook group, and we get clients together, and just by talking to other people that have been through something, real people, and they get so much value of going, oh, what, you felt like that too? Oh, I thought I was the only person ever that felt like that. And then just knowing that you're not alone in this, and there's other people that go through it, can be such a sense of comfort, right?
Oh, the magic at some of my courses, when there's multiple people in a workshop room or in an online workshop room, is amazing to watch them connect with each other. It's not about necessarily what they're learning from me. They can learn just as much from other people. I mean, I love that about this whole journey. And you will see it at all stages of life, right? Learning from other people is really powerful when we're in change. And the world is changing so fast right now. I learn by listening to people.
Oh, absolutely. But I've said many times there's 28 released, 32 recorded podcast episodes of this, and I've learned more having these conversations with people than any textbook could ever give me, and I learn a lot more by just sitting down and having conversations with real people about their real journey and how that can then impact. I want to get into the meat and bones of your wonderful book, if I may.
Of course.
There's two topics I want to really pull on, and I'm sure we'll come up with some questions and some stuff off them. But the first one is that really early on in the book, and I love the fact that you've obviously put this really early on, is the 6 pillars of retirement. Tell me through, you know, your work and everything you've done, why you've come up with those 6 pillars, and maybe just elaborate on them a little bit, you know, and we'll go through them, and we don't have to elaborate on all of them, but elaborate on some of the most important ones. But yeah, dive into those for me, because I think they're so relevant.
They present the underpinning structure of the book, because when I wrote the book, it needed a framework, because you couldn't just write about retirement. It's this sort of glob of stuff that happens in your life and then just keep dropping headings all the way through it. So I needed to invent a structure. And for me, it seemed very, very logical to approach it in this order. And I'll take you through the order, because you start with time. And by time, I mean, how long have you got left on this earth? If you're 47 when you're reading the book, or you're 67, you can take a sense of perspective based on the lifespan data and I point people to where they can complete lifespan calculators. It's one on my website, but also to the government lifespan data, because the Australian government, and I'm sure other governments throughout the world, predict a lifespan based on historical insights. They don't base it on science and modern medicine and the evolving, changing health standards that we've got in our world. So the Australian government says that if I'm 65 today, will likely live to the age of 85 if I'm a man, or 88 if I'm a woman.
Very similar in the UK, Bec. So we've got the Office of National Statistics, the ONS, and it's pretty much dead right, spot on with what they would say. And there's a little kind of, on the government website, you go on and basically you just put your age and what sex you are. They tell you.
Yeah. That's it. And it's based off data that's in a table, and it just pulls the data point up. Now, I went to some actuaries and said, I want to go deeper. Have you got some calculators that incorporate some of the environmental data, the health data, the insights into how you exercise and eat? Because we know the science of aging tell us that if you are looking after your body, if you're interacting with others, if you have close family relationships, you're likely to live longer. And so there's one on my website at epicretirement.com.au that people can go and fill out, and it will show you their extrapolated age based on an actuarial target. And mine, for instance, is 103. At a 90%, at a 70% confidence. At a 90% confidence, I think it's 97, right? So, and then you put your partner in, because the reality is that one in a partner is likely to live longer. And quite often, well, most people plan their retirements as a couple, not as a single person, unless you are single. And when you plan as a couple, you actually have to plan for the person who lives longest in the couple, not just plan for your own life and when you might drop off the perch, because your partner's reliant on the same pool of money. And that just gets you thinking. So we're thinking about our longevity, we're thinking about our time. So let's take a scenario where we're 60 today, and 50, this is a piece of data from the UK Parliament released in early last year in the UK Parliament, 50% of people in the UK born after 1971 are expected to live to 100. Does that make you fall in that cohort?
Yep. Does. Yeah.
So it's interesting, right? Because if we are basing our lifespan data on 88, we're going to expect, there's another piece of data in one of the Australian government reports on how long we might live over a longer period of time that says that 12% of our lifespan will be spent in poor health if we're a man and 13% if we're a woman.
Yep.
So you can take off, 8, 9, 10 years of your life for poor health. And a lot of that's at the end of life. So if you're 88 and you're expecting to be healthy until you say 80, right? You're then looking at life through a lens that if you live to 100, you've given up too early. And you've set your expectations on all the other parts, not just the financial parts, but the whole picture of life you've built in your head around which you've set your goals, your expectations, your visions of what you're going to do. They're all broken because if you live to 100 or 98, you're disappointed that you lived that long instead of excited. Right? So I just want to get everybody thinking for the future. If you're retiring tomorrow, it might not be absolutely as important, but it is, because you might have a 30-year retirement ahead of you. And if you don't go out and invent the things you want to do with interest and think about how your money is going to last and put it into the right investments so that it compounds throughout your retirement and get the whole situation right, then you're not taking the thoughts about time in. And that's why I talk about time, is because it's a foundation stone for every other discussion. Because if you think, okay, I'm going to live 30 years from when I retire, that's 1/3 of your life.
Yeah, it's mad. Yeah.
Right. How many of your years, right? You think about life in 3 phases. We spend the first third of our life learning, basically, and building up to a plateau where we are able to be in a career. Then we spend the second third of our life working in a full-blown job, paying off mortgages and debt and fulfilling our family obligations. But pretty much all of us used to die within 10 years of that window in the previous generations. So now there's no generations before these ones that have ever had a third phase of life that's been holistic enough to want to learn all over again in your 50s and 60s so that you could have a great 70s, 80s and 90s. And you could apply that into education, apply it into changing career paths, changing the way you look after your body. Just that continuous behaviour that we can shift into that we might previously have wound down at this stage of life. And I'd be sad if I wound down in my 60s.
Hi everyone, Dan here. I just wanted to jump in real quick to say that if you are thinking about or unsure where to start with your retirement plans, then I've put together what I believe to be one of the best free resources for you. My Retirement Toolkit is packed with videos, guides, webinars, worksheets, blogs, and podcast episodes, and is completely free to download. Just go to the show notes where you will find the link. Now, let's get back to the show. Because ultimately, look, if we knew the day we were going to die, you wouldn't have a book called this, really, would you? I mean, it's kind of like if we knew that day, financial advice and financial planning wouldn't exist, because it's a pretty simple maths equation then, right? It's kind of like, I know how much money
Absolutely.
I need. So that's the biggest variable, but also the biggest variable that I think people completely have a misunderstanding of. And as you said, quite rightly, and again, I've said many times on the podcast, in my mind, there are 2 types of time, or time spans. You've got health span and lifespan. And we need to, and the data coming out of the UK and the US is very similar to what you've said. It's, there's a kind of between 10 and 15 year kind of end of health span time before you typically then pass away. So
We're hoping it's shorter than that, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
And the science of healthy aging that's coming out of the US and the UK right now, I have to read about your country to get my research, is the fun part. And then I write it back here and send it back over, right? But the research that's coming out in the science of modern aging is telling us how to look after our bodies and condense the poor years of our life down and have a longer, stronger health span. And I think everybody should know about it. I wrote a section in the book on it, and I'm very, very passionate about teaching people to age better and take their health dead seriously. But we'll get to health in a minute because money is the second pillar.
Yeah, no. So look, time foundation, completely agree. I think it is so important to understand that and not just rely on a backward-looking statistical thing to give you this thing. That's why for all of our clients, we plan for the 100-year life, right? We plan for the last person.
I'm talking to Andrew Scott in a couple of weeks on my podcast, so I'm very excited.
No, really cool, right? So, and again, as you said, viewing it as a couple, people don't necessarily understand statistics very well. It's like, I've got a 50% chance of living to X. But actually, if you put two people in it, the percentages go up. So, like there's like an 80% chance that a married couple age 60 that one of you will get to about 95. It's ridiculous if you put two people together, right? So we need to plan for that. But yeah, I agree.
And you've got to plan for the whole of life thinking, right? I want people to view that life fairly optimistically, right? I don't want them to look at it pessimistically from the start. But that's why time. So then we get into money. And when I say money, I don't just mean money. I mean financial confidence, because ultimately you can have money but not draw it down because you're not confident with how much you can afford to draw down and how money works over the period of your lifespan. And I think, therefore, in the money section, I give you 11 areas that people need to understand. And I start with the systems and processes of retirement. In Australia, we have a pension system. It's a little bit different to the UK. And definitely different to the US. But the pension system is available to all Australians who pass an income or an assets test for the whole of their life after the age of 67. So it's a pretty amazing system. And you can take a part pension even if you have a $2 million house because your house is excluded from the qualifying criteria. So we can teach people in Australia to pay off their mortgage as early in life as they can and still have them eligible for the pension if they don't have a very large superannuation fund, which is a nice thing to know. So teaching them about that system, teaching them about the age pension and the superannuation system is very fundamental because I don't know about you, but in my 20s and 30s, I learned about residential real estate by buying property and getting in there and watching it grow during different property booms. Well, I think everybody should learn about how their money works in the second half of life by getting in there and understanding their pension funds and their retirement funds. And so few people take the time to learn the rules of the systems that I think then they're not able to have a meaningful conversation with their advisor. They're simply receiving information from their advisor. And I love people to ask. I want them to be curious and be better customers.
One thing I want to pick up very briefly on that before we move on to the next phase is that the financial confidence is so important to feel like you can then actually use your money for the thing it should be used for, right? You've worked hard to diligently save. You might have gone through some, tough times building a career or a business and all of that stuff. So you get to a point where you now need to use the thing that you've built up to now do the second half of life. And if you're not confident, then you are not going to fully let go. You're still going to be shackled and you're not going to take advantage of the newfound freedom and time that you have. So I think financial confidence is fundamental in people living an epic retirement.
It is. And one of the largest fears, the largest fear when I survey and ask questions of people is the FORO, the fear of running out. People desperately fear running out of money, even if they have plenty of it, right? And so it's a universal problem. People draw down the government mandated amount that they're allowed to at the very minimum in Australia, not the amount they could afford to if you really examine their budgets and understanding. So I have people go through and build a budget for their retirement. I teach them in the section how to think about the cost of living. We have some great benchmarks in Australia that allow you to understand the cost of living, and they're revised every quarter. So I teach people how to use those to set up their budget and compare them with the benchmarks. And then you start to move into thinking about layering your money, because when you're in retirement, you don't get a paycheck in Australia. You get various sources of income from various things, and people aren't used to that adjustment. They're not able to talk about that. So I think the more we talk about the fact that you layer a bit of government pension, you layer income from your pension fund, you might keep working for some small amount of income that might affect or not affect your pension incomes if they go above certain thresholds, and teach people how to master layering, right? Because I think that's powerful, and get them comfortable with the fact that they'll have multiple sources of income. And then also, of course, we have to talk about compound investing before retirement and after retirement, and how to use all of the ways to get money into your pension funds earlier so that they compound. And the reality that 60% of your earnings are usually done after retirement in Australia, right? I'm sure it is everywhere in the world. You know, the reality that people don't realize that if they pull all their money out of their fund on the first day of retirement, they miss out on 60% of the potential upside that they would have from compound investing and investing well with good advice. So I really just hammer that home.
Yeah.
I'm sure financial advisors love me for it, because I just want people to understand why.
Yeah. Well, and inflation is one of the biggest risks to people's retirement. You know, retaining purchasing power throughout your life is, you know, £1 or $1 spent today is less than £1 or $1 spent in 20 years' time. And if you want to feel financially confident that you can turn the heating on to a degree, or do the things that you need to do and live independently in later life, then the costs are going to go up. So compounding returns is really one of the only ways to kind of give yourself some sort of chance of success in making sure that you do that. Yeah, no, I agree. The third element is really interesting, isn't it? On this,
yeah.
so
You can't have an epic retirement without your health.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people run into retirement having worked too hard for too many years. They're tired. You know, in the old way, it was work yourself to the bone and then retire. Right. And worry about your body when you get there, because, you know, you can go for a morning walk after you retire. Well, I can tell you now, the science of healthy aging is just fascinating right now. I'm reading everything I can on it and working with academics and all sorts of wonderful things. And I tried to make sure I reflected it. And for me, I try to curate, I guess, a flavor of what's going on all around the world for people, so that they can see how they need to absorb this information, where they could go to get more insight into these things, or just to have a shallow view if that's all they have the interest in. But if you can understand there's two parts to health. There's looking after your body to improve your health span, just being proactive. And I hate to say it, but exercise and diet has been the solution for many, many decades. But it's new science now that's telling us, that's been proven on mammals, on the cells in mammals, to show that they can almost reverse aging with exercise and diet, right? Cellular senescence is really becoming a proven thing. So, you know, whether you believe the science or not, it's worth a read. It's worth understanding the future of aging science and how it's reversing the risks of cancer. It's turning down the dial on cardiovascular disease. It's impacting the genetics that drive things like diabetes and all of those major diseases we see in the second half of life. And then you've got the other side of health, which is we shouldn't just go to the doctor when we get sick. We should know enough about our bodies to know what to watch, what the warning signs are, and what we should be checking proactively to avoid chronic illness. And I don't mean in the jogging regularly and eating well, you know, Mediterranean diets and all that. I mean over here in, do you know what your blood pressure is? Do you know what your cholesterol is? Do you know what it should be? Because we can't rely on the medical system in the next phase of medicine to do the work for us. We've done that for too many decades, and medicine has become something that treats disease, not manages prevention. We have to change the whole mindset. And the older generations have the lowest health literacy in our modern world. You know, younger kids are coming through school and getting a lot of health literacy given to them, and mindfulness literacy and mental health literacy. But the generations that we're in and the ones that are older than us need more of the current health literacy support and guidance. And so I went and did all of my homework, and I found every single test that you can get in Australia sponsored by the government and not sponsored by the government, and all the metrics you should be measuring in your body, and made sure they were in the book.
And you can measure a lot of those by the thing on your wrist, right? Or something now.
Oh,
so,
yes.
you know, the information of I know information in the wrong hands or with the wrong knowledge is somewhat dangerous. But, you know, I think now the wearable technology that we have, it can be, you know, there's rings that you can wear that track your sleep. There's obviously watches. Honestly,
walk past the pharmacy though and get your blood pressure checked once every 3 months, right? Yeah. If you don't know what your blood pressure is and you haven't had it checked in a while and you don't want to have it checked, that's a question mark for me, because if you aren't willing to reverse the issues that you have, then you will have a crappy retirement, because your body will go before your money does.
Yeah.
Right. And here we are all worried about our money. And it's like, well, did you go to the gym today? Because I can tell you now, you'll be better for it if you did your weight, your muscle mass exercises, your cardiovascular health, and your balance exercises from midlife all the way through. If you can form good behaviors, you'll benefit for it all your life. And I hate to be that preachy girl, but you know, I just want us all to live our best life. I went to the gym this morning in between my 4:40 a.m. radio show and my 8 o'clock meeting. But if I can fit it in, other people can fit it in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That does lead on to the next phase as well, doesn't it? Absolutely. The next pillar.
It does, because, I mean, health is fundamental, but then you've really got to think separately about your happiness and fulfillment. The whole I start the happiness and fulfillment section with a deep dive into the science of happiness. And people might go, that's a load of codswallop. But there is a science of happiness, right? There is a set of data and insights that's come out of the academic world from studying 1 million or more people worldwide through the different phases of life, with them answering questions about when they felt happy and when they did not feel happy. And that's been going on for decades. There's also longitudinal studies of aging that are pointing, you know, the Harvard longitudinal study points to social activity being the single largest impactor of human happiness, right? And here we are worrying about our money as the primary way to have an epic retirement. I can tell you now, social interaction, you know, building families and friendships and community around you is absolutely and irreplaceably important in your retirement. And it's probably the hardest thing for people to do at this stage of life. It's harder to make friends because you're living a life a little bit more isolated. You don't gather with as many people. You know, it's fundamental that we have to give people the energy and the excitement to go back in and make some friendships and to look after their family relationships. And if they're isolating themselves, to step forward and find pathways out of isolation. It's actually the biggest epidemic in the world right now is aging isolation.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
So happiness is twofold. You've got the fundamental parts of happiness that are driven by short-term things that we do, you know, the hedonism, and finding and enjoying the moment. And then you've got the second part of happiness, which is really finding meaning in your life and looking for the ways that you can use things that you value, purpose, skills that you value, and skills that put you in the zone to give your life a sense of purpose if you're not working, or to keep working in some ways and really find things to do with your days. I talk a lot about finding epic pursuits, thinking about finding roles in your life that have meaning. And I walk people through the process of considering ways to get involved in communities as well.
It's fundamental, isn't it? I love it. And I've quoted and read the Harvard study many times. And I think again, I've said it a few times on the podcast, but that eye-opening piece of research that says about social connections, and the number one thing that people miss from the number one challenge of retirees through this study is the social interactions they miss through work. You know, I think that's so important, and I encourage, and I've linked it to a few, but I encourage anyone to go back and read there's good summaries of that study to read.
And I don't think in the future that our generations will give up work as quickly. And I don't think there'll be cold, hard retirements where we get a gold watch and stop work. I think we're heading for an era and a generation that's going to understand the value and the importance of work. We're also in a generation where workplaces can't afford to lose people out of the workforce. So they need us to stay one foot in and to have our epic retirement while we're still working. So, you know, that's why I called my podcast Prime Time, because I think the next phase is living a long prime time from early 50s right through to your 70s. And then when you absolutely tested out retirement from the sidelines of work so many times and for so long that you're ready to fully retire, it's really easy to turn off the last 2 days a week that you're doing and move over into your leisure activities that you've already built up.
We're going to cover the last two, but it links into the next bit that I'm going to talk to you about your 5 big stages of retirement, which I can't wait to delve into in a second. But actually, pillar number 5 is I think linked to some happiness and fulfillment, right? Because a lot, you know, a lot of people like to set you up. What do they like to do?
Travel. And Australians love to travel. I think we are the most travelled nation in the world, and our retirees are possibly well financially secured and by and large to travel all over the world. And I think we're the largest volume of passport holders in our country. The Brits aren't far behind, but the Americans do it differently. Not as many passport holders, not as many travellers in their retirement in the voracious way that we travel. So I have run a travel company for 6 years and watched over 60s travel behaviours. So I was able to, and also how the travel industry works. So I was able to tell the secrets of how to get a good deal in the book. And I think they're probably pretty universal. So I won't give too many of them away, but I will say if you want to know the secrets of how to get a good deal on your travel, I've certainly told the secrets of the industry and how you can go and find cracker deals from operators and where to look and where they won't tell you they're doing it. But if you can read between the lines, you'll know which ones to look for and how to look for it. And then really I've sat there and given everybody the best selling holidays in order. I've talked about the bucket list trips people dream of so that we could inspire some conversation around bucket list development, because I don't think people go in with anything other than, I guess, dinner party conversations and Facebook photos to go on to decide what they want to do, you know, and we don't want to work off human envy. We really just want to know what everybody's doing that's really, really popular and go, yeah, okay, I can work through those first. One thing I love to talk about in travel is a story I tell at the beginning of the travel section, which was told to me by one of my peers who's 59. She's starting to walk back her career into part-time because she wants to be able to travel more. And she has this attitude to traveling, which is she's got about 23 big trips in her, she thinks, for the rest of her life at 59, before she hits the point where you can't get big travel insurance anymore. It's hard to get travel insurance after the age of 80. That might change as we get older, but the costs are really on the insurer's side at that point. So she says, I've probably got 10 years of trekking holidays and climbing and doing hard things with packs and big suitcases and, you know, being able to be very, very energetic. Then I've got another 10 years of slightly closer to home and less arduous travel in me. And then maybe the last 3 or 4 years I'm doing quiet local stuff. But I don't intend to not travel, was her attitude. So she just wants to make sure that she gets out there and does it while she's fit now. I think anyone in their 70s will tell you that it's real.
Yeah. Oh, I said, I mean, we've got a really good community of sailors around our area and as clients. And, you know, we've got people in their 70s that are sailing quite extensively, that go out on their boats for 3, 4, 5 months a year. And, you know, they want to continue to do that. Your last pillar is actually quite interesting. I don't think if you kind of had to write down pillars, I think time, money, health, happiness would be. I wouldn't say it surprises many people. I love your definitions of it, but your last one I think is really interesting.
So it's called Your Home as You Age. And that's because I think people lose a lot of money by turning over their homes on the wrong whims in the second half of life. So if I can get people to see the whole perspective of their aging life, and this is where the next conversation on stages of life comes in as well. If you get perspective, you can then try and make your housing decisions earlier with perspective ahead of you, because it costs you in Australia about $100,000, give or take, to turn over a house between the taxes and the real estate agent's fees. And why lose that if you've only got a small super fund? Why take the risk of getting it wrong? We also have some wonderful concessions on downsizing from when we're 55 in this country, where we can get money into our pension funds tax-free. So understanding the way that works and getting perspective, but also getting perspective on industries that you're not familiar with, right? You go into retirement and you're pretty young still. So you're not really willing to talk about retirement villages or how they work. You don't really want to think they're in your future yet. But you do need to get some level of perspective of whether you think you need a lifestyle house in your 60s, or you want to buy one apartment that's going to try and get you through the whole period of your life, right? Or whether you want to live by the sea for a period, but then if your partner was to pass away, would you live closer to your children, right? Just having a bit of concept of what's important to you about where you live and how you might age in place. I mean, increasingly, the Australian government is trying to push everybody to use home care services, not aged care services. Only about 8% of our population will actually go into aged care, and that will only be high needs people in the future, because we just can't provide the facilities in institutions. The costs are too high. So we've got this wonderful subsidised home care system that people can access from the age of 65 once their health starts to decline and the government certifies them as able to access it. But if you then need to be living somewhere where you need to be able to have stairs modified and bathrooms modified and thought about that, you may not want to think about it. And I don't want anybody to have to act on it too early in life. But I just want to give people that big perspective so that they don't make rash decisions in their early 70s that they then have to reverse, 2 years later, because it was just a rash decision.
Yeah. There's two things you said in your book before we move on to the stages of retirement about the home that I just want to bring through. And so you said something along the lines of, in retirement, your home should suit your needs, not just be held on as your legacy, which I think that's that framework. People go, oh, do you know what? I'm going to live in this thing. It's got no mortgage. I'm going to pass it on to my children. It's fine. And what you end up sacrificing is your lifestyle.
So my grandpa did it. Yeah. My grandpa had this beautiful third generation family home. He was from, I guess you'd call it society in Australia. Not that we have any. But he felt it was very important. He earned all his money as a solicitor and he wanted his daughters to have this for their future. And, he'd spent his whole life counting down to die. And he was told that he had a year to live when I was born, but he lived all the way till I was 20-something, right? So he'd been trying to die for many, many years. And this legacy of his house had been willed to them and talked about. And, they promptly sold the bloody thing and split the money, fought over it. And that's just reality in life, right? We're not in a generation there where anybody can afford to hold on to long-standing family properties, or at least not in Australia. Necessarily, we're in an era where people move on from that into their modern lives. And I think I'd like the generation to be moderately selfish. I'd like you to look after yourself first, Think like the aeroplanes where they put the mask on yourself and then your children.
Yeah. Well, and it comes back to what you put, and I love this, one of the headings in your book, your home is no longer your castle, it's your golden goose. Yeah. I love that. Right? People think that it's that thing, but actually there's, huge amounts of people's wealth is tied up in their home. And as you said, the vast majority of families that are left behind after the owners have passed away fight over the bloody asset anyway. So, we need to start thinking, thinking very, very, very differently about our home, making sure that wherever we live in retirement, and we can change where we live, we can right size or downsize, but that home suits our retirement needs, both from a kind of makeup of the home point of view and how we might age in it, as well as our financial needs. So I think it's so important.
Yeah, I don't want somebody living in poverty because the money's all tied up in the house.
Oh, nuts, right? Because I don't want to leave it to the kids. I mean, just absolutely get that. Everybody get that out of your head right now. So I just want to spend the next 10 or so minutes, and maybe it'll be shorter, but however long it takes to elaborate and discuss, I think one of the most relevant and brilliant things you've written in your book, and that is the 5 big stages of retirement. I'm going to say them out loud, and then we're going to go through them. So I think it's really interesting to think about this. So pre-euphoria, adjustment, euphoria, post-euphoria, and frailty. Yeah. And I just think that actually it would resonate with everybody. So let's run through them. So where are we in life in our pre-euphoria stage of retirement planning?
So pre-euphoria is the stage where we're saving for retirement. It's the period where we're anticipating and building up our picture of retirement. We're getting excited. The only other time of life I can relate this to is that time before you had your first child. The great feeling of anticipation. There's something exciting ahead and I can't wait. It's going to be so good. Oh my God, I'm counting down to the day that it happens. And honestly, this is a traditional retirement because we can have pre-euphoria for decades in prime time. Right? We don't have to go into euphoria. We can live one foot in pre-euphoria and one foot in euphoria and never deal with adjustment. But I'll tell you that in a minute. Right? So pre-euphoria is this preparation phase. You can start this phase anywhere in your 50s normally, and you're starting to build a picture. Right? If you haven't got a picture, you need to start building one because it can be exciting just to have one and look forward to the next phase of your life and start to dream about the ways you get those best bits in. If you don't have goals, you won't chase the goals. And I think that's the biggest tragedy there can be. So then you move from pre-euphoria into adjustment, right? You hit the turning point of retirement and you say, I am now retired. Now that might be simply a numerical thing where you tell the government you're retired, you technically give up work because in Australia you need to either hit the age of 65 or completely stop work for a hot minute before you can go back. So that you can access your pension fund. You can access it, continue accessing it even if you go back to work, incidentally. But that adjustment phase is actually very, very real. And there's a wonderful book I love to refer people to read about transitions in life by William Bridges. It's actually the foundational book for change management. And when you read it and then you relate it back to retirement, and I talk about this book, it's just so real to understand that you go through an ending, a middle zone where you feel as lost as hell, and then there's a new beginning because you go out in the middle zone and start to look for ways to find fulfillment. And if you don't go out and look, if you don't accept there's an ending, right, you sit there saying, no, I haven't ended. My friends at work still want to talk to me. Oh, but they don't call me back anymore. Oh, well, I don't need new friends, all of that whole thinking where you don't get off your backside and go and say, I've actually left. They are busy. They are in their world, gas bagging at the water fountain, not worrying about the people that aren't there to stand with them, right? So you need new places to go, new people to do it with. And accepting that is the first point. Go into that middle zone and recognize that you've got to go looking for yourself, right? For the things that are going to make fulfillment in your life, for the ways to live your life in the next phase. And then those little sparks of new beginning will come and you will feel enormous excitement on the other side of adjustment. But I've found family members curled up in corners in tears in the adjustment phase. I've found friends really struggle with it. And many people in hindsight will talk about how their adjustment phase was very, very hard, but they didn't even know when they were in the middle of it enough to recognize it. So their wives recognize it, their partners recognize it. But yeah, adjustment's real. Then you get into euphoria, right? You really get in the swing of retirement. I can remember getting a phone call. I was in London as a teenager, as a 20-something, and my mother-in-law rings up and she's dancing on a table in a ski resort, having just retired. And I know I can actually relate the moment to when she was in euphoria, right? And it's this feeling of perpetual excitement. We've got it right. We're enjoying these things. We're loving them. I want to do more. I want to try more travel because that was such a good experience. I need to book another one. I enjoyed that dancing class so much. We've got to go next week. I can't wait to try another new golf club in Scotland, right? What is it that you're doing that you look forward to and you want to do more and more and more? And euphoria is that phase where you can't get enough. And euphoria it goes on for a long time. If you get it right, if you've really done your work, that I teach you in Epic Retirement, and that most people, sometimes they get tired of doing the work, So I want to egg you on to make your euphoria last and to keep investing in your own curiosity and your own courage to get back out there and look for things and keep that excitement alive. And then, something happens usually that brings you into post-euphoria. Either your physical health starts to decline, or your partner's physical health has a moment, or you just get tired, right? You can't keep going at that pace forever. So people then say, okay, post-euphoria is just a different phase of life. It's a phase where you look more locally for your activities. It's where you're not necessarily off traveling. You're building communities around you. And you'll find, and my dad turned around to me a couple of months ago and he said, I think I'm heading into post-euphoria. But he's in his local political party, writing letters to the local council. He's everything he can recognise in that. Being participatory in his local areas, joining his organisations in the local area, and going to the gym every day. And that, for him, he's in a routine, and he hasn't been in that for his euphoria. He's had a very, enjoyable euphoria. And now he feels like, this is a good, settled way of living. He's not unwell, he's healthy, but he's 77 and he wants to have a more settled life. And I think that's worth recognising, that it doesn't have to be bad. You need to find your fun some other places. And then post-euphoria goes along as long as you're independent, right? And at that point, when you hit frailty, you will need help. Right? You won't be able to do frailty alone. So your goal in life is to actually engineer your retirement to minimize the amount of time you spend in frailty by exercising now, so that your body lasts longer and your mind lasts longer. And you go through these good phases and you get to hold on to all the good bits and really enjoy them. And frailty is just hopefully a shelf at the end that goes quickly if we get it right.
I think it's just such a wonderful model to think about. And as you say, you can kind of label them you can uniquely label them, right? You can kind of think of words that resonate with you and go, what does that bit between the ages of, say, late 40s to, actually thinking about retiring, what do I want to label that? That's typically the bit where in your book you call about kind of the kids getting their P plates. So
your prime time.
Your prime time, right? Empty nesting, kids are moving out, bit more freedom. You're building up a pot of money that gives you a bit more confidence about the future. And actually you can do a lot of stuff in that pre-euphoria stage. Holidays become different.
I think the next generation will. Yeah, the next generation is going to do an extraordinary amount before retirement. And retirement will be later. It will be the line into retirement will be quite grey, I think, as well. Yes. We won't have as straight a line down. The gold watch won't be there.
No, I agree. Absolutely. So I think it's a wonderful model. Think about that transition. Think about what retirement looks like. Think about, as you slow down, what the kind of, what your late 70s, early 80s look like, and then start to think about, actually, what do I need to have to retain independence for as long as I can? And when I haven't got the ability to retain that independence, maybe I don't want to be a burden emotionally and financially on the children or anything like that. So how do I try and make sure that works? Yeah. So I think it's a wonderful framework to think about. Bec, this has been such a brilliant conversation, and we're kind of just past the hour mark, and so I want to kind of wrap this up. I think no, I know. Honestly, it's been so good, and I'm sure we'll do Bec and Dan volume 2 at some point, right? So
we have to,
because we've got so much more. I've got a list of questions that I never got to that I want to ask you, but I really want to thank you for coming on. I encourage everybody to buy Bec's book, to listen to her podcast, Prime Time, to go on her website, which all the links will be on there, the writing that you do, the courses that you offer, the knowledge and wisdom that you give back is so vital to this stage of life. So thank you for your work. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for kind of giving us your take on retirement. I think it's going to add so much value to people that listened in.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan.
Been brilliant. And that just leaves me to thank everybody once again for listening to the Humans versus Retirement podcast. Until next time, take care. Thanks for tuning in to the Humans versus Retirement podcast. I hope this show will arm you with insights, strategies, and a newfound excitement for navigating life beyond the 9-to-5 grind. Remember, retirement isn't just an endpoint, it's a vibrant chapter brimming with opportunities for growth, adventure, and purpose. Keep exploring, stay curious, and embrace the next phase of your life with enthusiasm. Until next time, may your retirement dreams continue to flourish and inspire.